Family is supposed to be about unconditional love. But what happens when that love comes with conditions? When the people who raised you make it clear that not all grandchildren are treated equally? I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. I never thought I'd have to make such a difficult choice between my parents and my children. But sometimes, the most painful decisions are the ones that teach us what family really means. This is the story of how one thoughtless comment changed our family forever, and how standing up for my children taught me that sometimes, the family we choose is more important than the family we're born into. I've always had a complicated relationship with my parents, especially my mother, Linda. Growing up in suburban Columbus, Ohio, it was clear that my older brother, Tyler, was the golden child. He was the star quarterback in high school, went to an Ivy League college on scholarship, and became a successful corporate attorney in Chicago. I, on the other hand, was more of a creative type, less ambitious in their eyes, but happy with my life choices. My name is Emma Wilson. I'm 36 years old and work as a high school art teacher. I married my college sweetheart, David, who's a physical therapist at the local hospital. We live in a modest but comfortable house in Cincinnati, about 2 hours from my parents' home. We have 3 amazing kids, Sophia, who's 10, and the twins, Ethan and Lily, who are 7. Tyler married Vanessa, a pharmaceutical sales representative, and they have 2 children, Madison, 12, and Jackson, 9. They live in an upscale neighborhood in Chicago, with a vacation home in Michigan. My parents never hesitated to mention how impressive their lifestyle was compared to our simpler existence. I always knew there was favoritism in our family, but I tried not to let it bother me. David would often remind me that what mattered most was the life we built together and the love we had for our children. For the most part, I believed him, and we focused on creating a warm, supportive home for our kids. But favoritism became harder to ignore when grandchildren entered the sea. Picture. It started with small things. My mother would send designer clothes to Madison and Jackson, while my kids received clearance items from department stores. When Sophia had her ballet recital, my parents claimed they were too busy to drive the 2 hours to see it. Yet they flew to Chicago multiple times a year to attend Madison's soccer tournaments. It's just the way they are, I'd tell David. They've always been more invested in Tyler's life. David would frown, but respect my decision to keep the peace. As long as they're not hurting the kids directly, he'd say. But if that ever changes, we need to reconsider how much time we spend with them. Last Thanksgiving, we decided to host the entire family at our home. It was the first time we'd all be together in nearly 2 years, partly due to COVID restrictions, but also because Tyler's family was always too busy to come to Ohio. My parents initially hesitated, suggesting we all meet at a restaurant in Columbus instead, but eventually agreed when Tyler confirmed he could make it. I spent weeks preparing for the gathering. I wanted everything to be perfect, not to impress my parents, but to create a warm holiday memory for all our children. Sophia helped me pick out the decorations, and the twins were excited to make handmade place cards for everyone. I even took time off work to deep clean the house and prepare homemade pies using my grandmother's recipes. The day before Thanksgiving, Tyler called to say they'd be arriving late because Madison had a last-minute invitation to a friend's house that morning. I felt that familiar pang of disappointment but pushed it aside. At least they were still coming. Thanksgiving Day arrived, and I was up at dawn, putting the turkey in the oven and finishing the last-minute preparations. By noon, my parents had arrived, Mom immediately commenting on how quaint our home looked with the decorations. It's not the same as professional decorating, of course, but you've done your best with what you have, she said with that tight smile I knew all too well. Dad brought in several shopping bags filled with presents. Just a few things for the grandkids, he explained. When Sophia, Ethan, and Lily ran to greet them, Mom gave them quick, stiff hugs. "Where should we put these?" she asked, holding up the bags. These are for when Madison and Jackson arrive. I noticed my children's faces fall slightly. Don't you have anything for your other grandchildren? I asked quietly. Oh, we'll get them something at Christmas, Dad said dismissively. These are special gifts because we don't see Tyler's kids as often. I bit my tongue and directed them to put the bags in the guest room. David caught my eye from across the room, his expression asking if I was okay. I nodded slightly, not wanting to create tension before Tyler even arrived. 3 hours. Later, Tyler's family finally showed up. Madison immediately started complaining about how long the drive was and how boring Ohio is compared to Chicago. Jackson barely looked up from his gaming device to acknowledge anyone. Vanessa air-kissed me on both cheeks before commenting on how brave I was to host Thanksgiving in such a small house. But the moment Tyler walked in, the atmosphere changed. My parents' faces lit up as if someone had flipped a switch. Mom rushed to hug Madison and Jackson, cooing over how much they'd grown and how beautiful they looked. There they are, our gorgeous grandchildren, she exclaimed, as if my 3 children weren't standing right there. We settled in for dinner, the table crowded but festive with the decorations the kids and I had made. I'd assigned seating to make sure everyone was comfortable, but Mom immediately rearranged the place cards. I want Madison and Jackson next to me, she announced, and Tyler next to your father. They have business matters to discuss. I watched as my mother moved my children's handmade place cards without a second thought. Sophia's eyes welled with tears. She'd spent hours carefully writing everyone's names in her best cursive and drawing little turkeys on each card. I caught David's eye again, and this time he didn't hide his frustration. Throughout dinner, the pattern continued. My parents fawned over every word Madison and Jackson spoke, while barely acknowledging when my children tried to join the conversation. When Ethan excitedly shared that he'd made the elementary school honor roll, my father merely nodded before turning to ask Jackson about his private school's curriculum. After the meal, as we were serving dessert, Madison announced she didn't want any of the homemade stuff, and asked if there was any store-bought ice cream. My mother immediately jumped up. I think I saw a Haagen-Dazs in your freezer, Emma. Madison prefers premium ice cream. She has quite the sophisticated palate. The ice cream she'd spotted was actually a special treat David had bought for our anniversary the following week. But before I could say anything, Mom had already scooped half of it into a bowl for Madison. As the evening progressed, the favoritism became even more blatant. My parents presented their gifts to Tyler's children, expensive electronic tablets, for each of them, loaded with games and accessories. Madison and Jackson barely said thank you before tearing into the packages and immediately starting to play with them. My children watched quietly, and I could see the hurt in their eyes. Lily, the youngest and most sensitive of my twins, tugged on my sleeve. Mommy, why don't Grandma and Grandpa bring us presents too? Don't they love us? I was trying to find the right words to explain when my mother overheard. Now, Lily, she said with a condescending smile. Don't be jealous. Madison and Jackson don't get to see us as often as you do, so they get special treats. Besides, your parents can't afford to give you the kinds of things they have, so we need to help balance things out. The room fell silent. I felt as if all the air had been sucked out of my lungs. David's hand found mine under the table and squeezed it hard. What exactly do you mean by that, Linda? David asked, his voice deceptively calm. My mother seemed oblivious to the tension she'd created. Well, it's just that Tyler and Vanessa can provide certain advantages for their children that you two can't. Better schools, more enriching activities, nicer things. We feel we should help make up the difference with our other grandchildren. Your other grandchildren? I repeated, my voice shaking slightly. You mean your grandchildren who live closer to you? The ones who invite you to every school play, every art show, every milestone? The ones who made you handmade birthday cards and Father's Day gifts? Those grandchildren? Mom looked flustered. Don't be so sensitive, Emma. You know what I mean. Madison and Jackson are just, well, they're being raised with certain expectations. Tyler has worked hard to give them opportunities. And what exactly do you think David and I have been doing? I asked, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Our children are kind, thoughtful, and hardworking. They excel in school. They help others. But apparently, that's not enough for you. Tyler finally seemed to sense something was wrong. Hey, let's not do this now. It's Thanksgiving. You're right, I said, standing up. It is Thanksgiving, a day to be grateful for family, all the family. I turned to my mother. Mom, I need you to explain why you just told my 7-year-old daughter that her grandparents love her cousins more because her parents can't provide the same lifestyle. Mom rolled her eyes. Oh, for heaven's sake, Emma. Always so dramatic. I simply meant that we have different relationships with different grandchildren. If we're being honest, we do connect more easily with Madison and Jackson. They're more like us. Like you? David asked. Materialistic and status conscious? Tyler stood up abruptly. Watch it. That's my family you're talking about. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. And this is mine, David replied evenly. Including Emma and our children, who deserve respect and equal treatment from their grandparents. My father, who had been quietly watching the exchange, finally spoke up. Look, Emma, we love all our grandchildren, but it's natural to have stronger bonds with some than others. Tyler's kids are just more accomplished. They have more potential. It's not their fault, and it's not yours either. It's just how things are. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My parents weren't even trying to hide their favoritism anymore. They were openly declaring that they preferred Tyler's children because they saw them as superior. I looked at my children. Sophia was trying to comfort Lily, who had started crying, quietly. Ethan was staring at the floor, his little shoulders hunched. The sight broke something in me, the last thread of hope that my parents might eventually see the value in my family, in the life David and I had built. I think, I said slowly, deliberately, that it's time for you all to leave. Emma, my mother gasped. You're overreacting. We're just being honest with you. Yes, you finally are. After years of subtle digs and backhanded compliments, you've finally said what you really think. And now I'm being honest too. I won't allow my children to grow up thinking they're less worthy of love and attention because they don't have expensive hobbies or attend private schools. Tyler stepped forward. Emma, come on. You're embarrassing yourself. Mom and Dad didn't mean it like that. How exactly did they mean it, Tyler? David asked. Please, enlighten us about how telling children to their faces that their cousins are more worthy of love and attention could possibly be interpreted positively. Vanessa, who had been scrolling through her phone for most of the argument, finally looked up. This is ridiculous. We drove all this way for a family Thanksgiving. And now you're kicking us out because your kids can't handle not being the center of attention for once. That was the final straw. I turned to Vanessa, my voice steady despite the rage and hurt coursing through me. My children have never been the center of attention in this family. Not once. They've been sidelined, ignored, and made to feel less than, from the moment they were born. And yes, I am asking you to leave. Not because my children can't handle something, but because I can't handle watching them be hurt anymore. I won't allow it. My father stood up, his face flushed with anger. If that's how you feel, then fine. But don't expect us to keep making efforts if you're going to be this unreasonable. Efforts? I laughed, though there was no humor in it. What efforts, Dad? Showing up once a year and bringing gifts only for your favorite grandchildren? Skipping Sophia's art show where she won first place but flying to Chicago for Madison's soccer practice? Those kinds of efforts? My mother gathered her purse and coat. I never thought you'd be the kind of person to divide the family like this, Emma. I raised you better." "No, Mom," I said quietly. "You didn't. David and I are raising our children better. To know that their worth isn't determined by material, possessions, or status symbols. To understand that family means supporting each other unconditionally." The next few minutes were a blur of tense goodbyes and slammed doors. Tyler's family left first, Madison loudly complaining about how she knew coming to Ohio was going to be lame. My parents followed shortly after, my mother tearfully claiming I was tearing the family apart out of jealousy. When the house was finally quiet, I found my children huddled together on the couch in the living room. Their faces were solemn, confused, hurt. I sat down next to them and David joined us, putting his arm around my shoulders. "I'm so sorry you had to hear those things," I said, my voice breaking. "But I want you to know something very important. You are all incredible, brilliant, kind human beings. And how much money someone has, or what kind of job they have, or where they live, none of that determines their worth. But Grandma and Grandpa don't think we're as good as Madison and Jackson," Sophia said quietly. "Grandma and Grandpa are wrong," David said firmly. "And sometimes even adults can be wrong, even grandparents." "Are we not going to see them anymore?" Ethan asked, his voice small. I exchanged a look with David before answering. "I don't know, honey. Right now, I think we all need some space. But what I do know is that in this house, with this family, you are loved completely, exactly as you are." The days following Thanksgiving were eerily quiet. No calls from my parents, no texts from Tyler. It was as if a storm had swept through our lives and left this strange, uncomfortable silence in its wake. The kids went back to school on Monday, and David and I returned to work, but the tension from Thanksgiving lingered in our home like a ghost. I caught myself checking my phone more often than usual, half expecting, maybe even hoping, to see a message from my mother. An apology, an explanation, anything that might help mend the rift that had opened between us. But my phone remained silent. "Are you okay?" David asked one evening as we were cleaning up after dinner. The kids were upstairs doing homework, and I'd been standing at the sink, staring absently out the window for who knows how long. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Part of me feels liberated, like I finally stood up for our family after years of swallowing my pride. But another part feels guilty, like I've robbed the kids of their grandparents." David dried his hands on a dish, towel, and turned me to face him. "Emma, you didn't rob them of anything. Your parents made their choices, and they've been making them for years. You just finally called them out on it." "I know, but nothing," he said firmly. "You heard what they said about our children, about us. Would you rather our kids grow up thinking they're somehow less worthy because they don't have the newest iPad or attend some fancy private school?" I shook my head. "Of course not." "Then you did the right thing," David said, pulling me into a hug. "And for what it's worth, I'm proud of you. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary." I sank into his embrace, drawing strength from his certainty. Maybe he was right. Maybe this confrontation had been a long time coming. 2 weeks passed without any contact from my family. Christmas was approaching, and the kids were starting to ask questions. "Are we going to Grandma and Grandpa's for Christmas Eve this year?" Sophia asked one morning as I was helping her with her winter coat before school. It was a tradition we'd maintained for years. Christmas Eve at my parents' house, Christmas Day at home with just our immediate family. But this year, everything was different. "Not this year, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "We're going to do something different. Maybe we can volunteer at the community center's holiday meal, or visit the children's hospital with those gift baskets your class has." "Been making?" Sophia studied my face with a perceptiveness that sometimes startled me. At 10, she noticed far more than I gave her credit for. "Is it because of what happened at Thanksgiving?" she asked quietly. I considered deflecting or offering a simplified explanation, but Sophia deserved honesty. Partly, I admitted. Grandma and Grandpa said some things that hurt our feelings, and sometimes when that happens, people need time apart to think about things. They like Madison and Jackson more than us, she stated matter-of-factly. That's what they said. My heart ached at her bluntness. They said they connect more easily with your cousins, but that doesn't mean they don't love you. They have some wrong ideas about what's important in life. Like what? I zipped up her coat and knelt to her level. They think things like money and fancy schools and expensive activities make people more special or important. But that's not true. What makes someone special is their kindness, their character, the way they treat others. And by those measures, you, Ethan, and Lily are extraordinary. She seemed to consider this, then nodded. I think they're wrong too. Very wrong, I agreed, giving her a quick hug before we headed out the door. That weekend, I was grading art. Projects at the kitchen table when my phone rang. Tyler's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? Emma, hey. Tyler's voice was cautious, formal. How are you? Fine, I replied, equally guarded. What's up? There was a pause, and I could practically see him gathering his thoughts, formulating whatever pitch or argument he'd prepared. Tyler had always been the negotiator, the smooth talker who could convince anyone of anything. It was part of what made him such a successful attorney. Look, I think things got out of hand at Thanksgiving, he finally said. That's putting it mildly, I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Mom and Dad are pretty upset. They feel like you overreacted and embarrassed everyone over a few harmless comments. I gripped the phone tighter. Harmless? They told my 7-year-old daughter to her face that they prefer your kids because they're more accomplished and have more potential. How exactly is that harmless? They didn't mean it like that, Tyler insisted, using the same dismissive tone he'd employed at Thanksgiving. You know how Mom is. She speaks without thinking sometimes. No. Tyler. She says exactly what she thinks, and that's the problem. She meant every word. Another pause. I could hear muffled voices in the background. Vanessa, probably, coaching him on what to say next. Christmas is coming up, he continued, changing tactics. Mom wants to know if you're still coming over on Christmas Eve. She's already bought gifts for the kids. For all the kids or just yours? I couldn't help asking. Jesus, Emma. Do you have to be so difficult about everything? Yes, for all the kids. She feels bad about what happened. Has she said that? Has she called to apologize or even acknowledge how hurtful her behavior was? You know Mom doesn't apologize, Tyler said with a short laugh. But this is her way of trying to make amends. I closed my eyes, willing myself to stay calm. That's not good enough, Tyler. I need to hear from her directly that she understands why what she said was wrong, and that she's committed to treating all her grandchildren equally going forward. So what? You're holding Christmas hostage now? Using your kids as pawns to get what you want? His accusation stung, partly because it twisted my intentions so completely. I'm not using anyone as pawns. I'm protecting my children from people who make them feel inferior and unwanted. There's a difference. They're their grandparents, for God's sake. They love those kids. Do they? Because love means acceptance, support, and validation, not comparing them unfavorably to their cousins at every opportunity. Tyler sighed heavily. Look, I didn't call to argue. I just thought maybe we could put this behind us for the holidays. Start fresh in the new year. Some things can't be smoothed over with a festive dinner and presents, Tyler. This isn't a minor disagreement. It's a fundamental issue about how our parents view and treat my children versus yours. And until that changes, I don't see how we can just put it behind us. So that's it? You're cutting Mom and Dad off? Depriving your kids of their grandparents over one bad day? It wasn't one bad day, I said quietly. It was the day I finally stopped pretending everything was fine when it's been broken for years. After I hung up, I sat at the table for a long time, staring at the colorful array of student artwork spread before me. Each piece was unique. Some technically proficient, others wildly creative, all of them valuable in their own way. Just like children, just like people. Why couldn't my parents see that? The following day, Sunday, I was at the grocery store with Ethan and Lily when I quite literally bumped carts with Jessica Rivera, an old high school friend who'd moved back to Cincinnati a few years ago. Her daughter, Zoe, was in the same class as the twins. "Emma, I was just thinking about you," Jessica exclaimed, giving me a warm hug. "We're putting together the Winter Festival committee at school, and I was hoping you'd help with the art station again this year. The kids loved those snowflake designs you taught them last time." "I'd be happy to," I said, genuinely pleased by the invitation. Jessica had always been one of those naturally inclusive people who made everyone feel valued, the opposite of my family dynamic. As the twins and Zoe chattered excitedly about the festival, Jessica looked at me more closely. "Everything okay? You seem a little down." I hesitated, then gave her the abbreviated version of the Thanksgiving disaster. Jessica listened intently, her expression shifting from surprise to outrage. "That's awful," she said when I finished. "No wonder you're upset. The worst part is, I'm starting to question whether I did the right thing. Maybe I should have just let it go for the kids' sake." Jessica shook her head firmly. "No way. You absolutely did the right thing. My parents divorced when I was 9, and my dad remarried a woman with 2 kids. He started treating them better than me and my brother, giving them better gifts, attending their events but missing ours. My mom never said anything because she didn't want to rock the boat." "What happened?" "I grew up thinking I wasn't enough," Jessica said simply. "That somehow I was less deserving of love and attention. It took years of therapy to undo that damage. By standing up for your kids, you're showing them that they deserve respect and equal treatment. That's a powerful message." Her words stayed with me long after we parted ways. That evening, I shared the conversation with David. "Jessica's right," he said. "We're not just making a decision about a holiday gathering. We're setting an example for our kids about boundaries and self-respect." "I know," I sighed. "I just wish it didn't have to be this way. I wish my parents could see what they're doing. And how harmful it is." "Maybe they will eventually," David offered. "Sometimes people need time and distance to gain perspective." "Maybe," I echoed, though I wasn't convinced. My parents had spent decades reinforcing their particular worldview. It seemed unlikely they'd have a sudden epiphany now. 3 days before Christmas, a delivery truck pulled up to our house. The driver unloaded several large, beautifully wrapped packages addressed to Sophia, Ethan, and Lily. "Who are they from?" Sophia asked excitedly as we carried them into the living room. I checked the gift tags. "Grandma and Grandpa," I said, my stomach tightening. There was no card, no note, no attempt at communication beyond the presents themselves. It was exactly what Tyler had described, my mother's way of making amends without actually addressing the problem. "Can we open them?" Lily asked, her eyes wide with anticipation. I looked at the eager faces of my children and felt torn. On one hand, I didn't want to deprive them of gifts from their grandparents. On the other, I worried about what message it sent to accept these presents without any acknowledgement of what had happened. "Let's wait for Dad to get home," I suggested, buying myself some time to think. When David returned from work, we discussed it privately in our bedroom. "I don't think we should let them open the gifts," I said. "It feels like my parents are trying to buy their way back into our good graces without taking responsibility for their actions." David considered this. "I see your point, but I'm also concerned about putting the kids in the middle. They didn't ask for any of this conflict." "I know," I admitted. "That's what makes it so difficult." After some discussion, we reached a compromise. We would allow the children to open one gift each before Christmas, but we would also sit down with them and have an age-appropriate conversation about the situation. That evening, we gathered in the living room. The kids selected one present each, and after they'd opened them, an art set for Sophia, building blocks for Ethan, and a plush unicorn for Lily, David and I explained our decision. Grandma and Grandpa sent these gifts because they care about you, I began carefully. But remember what we talked about after Thanksgiving? About how words and actions can hurt people's feelings? The kids nodded solemnly. Well, when someone hurts your feelings, it's important that they understand what they did wrong and say they're sorry. Grandma and Grandpa haven't done that yet. So they sent presents instead of saying sorry? Ethan asked, surprisingly perceptive for a 7-year-old. That's right, David confirmed. And while presents are nice, they don't fix the problem. It's like if you broke someone's toy and then gave them candy instead of apologizing and trying to fix the toy. That wouldn't be right, Sophia agreed. Exactly, I said. So we're going to keep these other presents until after we've had a chance to talk with Grandma and Grandpa. Is that okay with everyone? The kids nodded again, though with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Lily looked longingly at the remaining packages, but she didn't protest. In the meantime, David added, brightening his tone, we have lots of fun plans for Christmas. Tomorrow we're delivering those care packages to the children's hospital, and on Christmas Eve, we're going to bake cookies and watch holiday movies in our pajamas. The mention of these activities seemed to lift the mood, and soon the kids were chattering excitedly about which cookies to make and which movies to watch. Later that night, after the children were in bed, I called my mother. I hadn't planned to, had, in fact, been determined to wait for her to make the first move. But the gift delivery had forced my hand. The phone rang several times, and I was beginning to think she wouldn't answer when her voice suddenly came through, cool and reserved. Hello, Emma. Hi, Mom. I'm calling about the gifts you sent. Oh? Did they arrive safely? I paid extra for expedited shipping. Of course that would be her concern. Not whether her grandchildren were okay, or how they were feeling about the rift in the family, but whether the delivery service had done its job properly. They arrived, I confirmed. But Mom, we need to talk about what happened at Thanksgiving before we can move forward. Her tone immediately hardened. I don't see what there is to discuss. You overreacted and ruined everyone's holiday. If anyone should be apologizing, it's you. I closed my eyes, silently counting to 10 before responding. Mom, you told my 7-year-old daughter to her face that you prefer her cousins because they're being raised with certain advantages that David and I can't provide. You said Tyler's children have more potential than mine. How exactly was I supposed to react to that? I was just being honest, she said defensively. Some children do have more opportunities than others. That's simply a fact. But loving. Grandparents don't rank their grandchildren based on their parents' income or zip code. They love them equally, support them equally, and make them all feel valued. We do love them all, my mother insisted. But it's not a crime to acknowledge that Madison and Jackson are being raised in a more ambitious environment. I felt a surge of frustration. She still didn't get it, or more likely didn't want to get it. Mom, do you remember what you used to tell me when I was little? That it's not what you have, but who you are that matters? Of course, but no buts. Either you believe that or you don't. And if you do, then you should recognize that my children are kind, creative, hardworking, and compassionate. Those are the qualities that matter, not whether they attend private school or have expensive hobbies. There was a long pause. I don't know what you want from me, Emma. I want you to acknowledge that what you said was hurtful and wrong. I want you to commit to treating all your grandchildren with equal love, attention, and respect moving forward. And I want you to understand that if you can't do that, then we need to limit our contact for the well-being of my children. So you're giving me an ultimatum? Her voice was rising now, indignant. Either I agree with your version of events or I don't get to see my grandchildren. It's not my version, Mom. It's what happened. And yes, I am setting a boundary, because my first responsibility is to protect my children from people who make them feel less than, even if those people are family. I can't believe you're doing this, she said, her tone shifting to wounded. After everything your father and I have done for you, this is how you repay us? It was a familiar tactic, the guilt trip, the reminder of all I supposedly owed them. But this time, it didn't work. This isn't about repayment or gratitude, Mom. It's about basic respect and decency. My children deserve to be valued for who they are, not measured against their cousins. I don't know what's happened to you, she said coldly. You used to be such a sweet, reasonable girl. Now you're so confrontational. What happened is that I became a mother, I replied. And I realized that I need to be the parent to my children that I wished you had been to me. The silence that followed was deafening. I'd never spoken to my mother this way before, had never so directly challenged her perception of herself as a good parent. I think we should end this conversation before one of us says something they regret, she finally said, her voice tightly controlled. Too late for that, I murmured, but didn't press the issue. The kids can open the rest of the gifts after we've resolved this. Until then, they'll stay wrapped. Do whatever you want, she snapped. You clearly intend to anyway. After she hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed, feeling drained but also strangely empowered. For perhaps the first time in my life, I had stood my ground with my mother without backing down or second-guessing myself. It didn't feel good, exactly. The situation was too sad for that. But it felt right, necessary, like lancing a wound that had been festering for years. Picked up my phone again and sent a text to Jessica. Thanks for your advice the other day. It helped more than you know. Her reply came almost immediately. Anytime. Standing up for yourself and your kids is never easy, but it's always worth it. How about coffee after drop-off tomorrow? I make a mean gingerbread latte. I smiled, grateful for the reminder that family isn't always about blood relations. Sometimes, it's about the people who see your worth without conditions or comparisons. It's a date, I texted back. I could use a friend right now. A true friend. Someone who valued me for who I was, not what I had or hadn't accomplished. Someone who understood that real love doesn't come with rankings or conditions. Maybe that was the lesson in all this. That family isn't defined by DNA, but by mutual respect, support, and unconditional acceptance. And if my parents couldn't offer that to my children, then perhaps it was time to expand our definition of family to include those who could. Christmas came and went in a blur of homemade decorations, cookie baking, and holiday movies. Though different from our usual celebrations, it was peaceful in a way our holidays rarely were. Without the tension of trying to please my parents or compete with Tyler's family, we could simply enjoy being together. The children seemed genuinely happy with our improvised traditions. We volunteered at the Children's Hospital on Christmas Eve morning, delivering care packages to kids who couldn't be home for the holidays. The experience had a profound effect on all of us, especially Sophia, who announced on the drive home that she wanted to become a pediatric nurse when she grew up. I want to help kids feel better, she explained, her expression serious, and make them not so scared of being in the hospital. That evening, we baked more cookies than we could possibly eat, drank hot chocolate with peppermint sticks, and watched Christmas movies in matching pajamas that David had secretly ordered weeks before. The twins fell asleep on the couch before the final movie ended, and David carried them up to bed while Sophia and I arranged presents under the tree. "Mom?" Sophia asked as we worked. "Are you sad about not seeing Grandma and Grandpa?" I paused, considering how to answer honestly without burdening her. "A little," I admitted. "It's hard when family relationships change, but I'm also really happy about the Christmas we're having together, just us." She nodded thoughtfully. "Me too. It's more fun without Madison complaining about everything and Jackson ignoring everyone." I suppressed a smile at her bluntness. Everyone shows love differently, I said diplomatically. But yes, it is nice to just focus on our family this year. Christmas morning was a joyful chaos of torn wrapping paper, excited shrieks, and pancakes shaped like reindeer. We spent the day playing with new toys, building a snowman in the backyard, and watching the snowfall from our warm living room while drinking more hot chocolate. It was simple, but it felt right. New Year's Eve arrived, and with it, an unexpected invitation. My phone pinged with a text message from an unfamiliar number. "Emma, it's Vanessa. Tyler doesn't know I'm contacting you. Can we talk?" I stared at the message in disbelief. In all the years Tyler and Vanessa had been married, we'd never had a one-on-one conversation that wasn't purely superficial. What could she possibly want to discuss now? Curiosity got the better of me. "Sure," I texted back. "When?" "Today? Coffee at that place near your house? 3 p.m.? I agreed, intrigued and slightly wary. David raised an eyebrow when I told him. "Vanessa, wants to meet you? Alone?" he asked, skepticism evident in his voice. "The same Vanessa who spent Thanksgiving scrolling through her phone and calling your kids spoiled?" "I know. It's weird," I acknowledged. "But maybe she wants to apologize, or at least explain their side of things." "Just be careful," David cautioned. "I don't trust her not to use anything you say against you later." His warning was reasonable given our history with Vanessa, but there was something in her text, an urgency perhaps, that made me think this might be different. At 3 o'clock, I walked into Maple Street Coffee, a cozy local cafe about 10 minutes from our house. Vanessa was already there, sitting at a table in the corner, her designer coat draped carefully over the back of her chair. As always, she was immaculately put together. Not a hair out of place, makeup perfect, nails freshly manicured. But as I approached, I noticed something different. Her usual poised expression was replaced by something more vulnerable, almost anxious. "Thanks for coming," she said as I sat down across from her. "I wasn't sure you would." "I was curious," I admitted. "We've never really talked, just the two of us." A server came by and we both ordered a latte for me, an Americano for her. When he left, Vanessa took a deep breath. "I want to apologize for Thanksgiving," she said, surprising me immediately. "I was rude to you and dismissive of your kids. It wasn't right." I blinked, momentarily speechless. Of all the scenarios I'd imagined, a straightforward apology from Vanessa hadn't been one of them. "Thank you," I said cautiously. "But I have to ask, why now? And why meet in person instead of just texting an apology?" Vanessa glanced down at her perfectly manicured hands, uncharacteristically hesitant. "Because there's more I wanted to say, and it's not the kind of thing you say in a text. And because—" She paused, then met my eyes directly. "Because I think you were right." Now I was truly shocked. "Right about what?" "About Linda and Robert. About how they treat your kids compared to mine." She said this matter-of-factly, without a hint of defensiveness. I've always noticed it, to be honest. But Tyler insisted it was just your perception, that his parents treated all their grandchildren the same. Our drinks arrived, providing a brief interruption. When the server left again, I leaned forward. What changed? Vanessa stirred her Americano, slowly. "Christmas," she said simply. "We spent it at your parents' house like usual. But this year, it was just us. No buffer of other family members. And their behavior was so—" She searched for the word. Blatant. Even I couldn't ignore. "What happened?" I asked, genuinely curious. It was constant commentary about how exceptional Madison and Jackson are, how they're destined for greatness, how Tyler and I are such superior parents for giving them these amazing opportunities. She made air quotes around the word superior. But then Linda would immediately follow it with these backhanded comments about you and David. How it's a shame your kids don't have the same advantages. How they worry about their futures. I felt a familiar twist of hurt, though it was somewhat dulled by time and distance. That sounds about right. It was uncomfortable, Vanessa continued. Even the kids noticed. Jackson actually asked me why. Grandma keeps saying mean things about Aunt Emma. That surprised me. Jackson had always seemed so self-absorbed, so wrapped up in his devices that I wasn't sure he paid attention to adult conversations at all. What did you tell him? The truth. That I didn't know, but that it wasn't okay. And that's when I realized how toxic it was. Not just for your family, but for mine too. She took a sip of her coffee, then continued. My kids are being taught that their value comes from their achievements and material advantages. That they're somehow inherently better than their cousins because they go to private school or play expensive sports. What kind of lesson is that? It was a remarkably insightful observation from someone I'd always considered shallow and status conscious. I found myself reassessing Vanessa as she spoke. And there's something else, she added, her voice dropping, slightly. Something I've never told anyone, not even Tyler. She hesitated, and I waited, sensing this was important to her. My parents were like yours, openly favoring my older sister over me. She was the academic star, the perfect daughter. I was the disappointing one who cared more about clothes and boys than grades. She gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. I spent my whole childhood trying to win their approval in other ways, by being pretty, by dating popular guys, by cultivating this perfect image. None of it worked. They still preferred her. I'm sorry, I said, genuinely meaning it. That must have been painful, Vanessa nodded. It was. And even though I've built this successful life, good career, beautiful home, designer wardrobe, deep down I still feel like I'm not enough. Like I'm constantly having to prove my worth. The vulnerability in her confession touched me. For the first time, I saw past Vanessa's perfectly manicured exterior to the wounded person beneath. So watching your parents do the same thing to your kids, I began. It's like watching my own childhood trauma being passed down to the next generation, she finished. And I can't be part of it anymore. I won't. Does Tyler know you feel this way? She sighed. We've been arguing about it since Christmas. He keeps defending his parents, saying I'm overreacting. That's why I reached out to you directly. I thought maybe if we presented a united front. You want us to confront my parents together? I asked, surprised by the suggestion. Not confront exactly. But maybe if both families set boundaries at the same time, they'd actually listen. Tyler respects you more than he lets on, Emma. If he knew we were on the same page about this, it might help him see the situation more clearly. I considered her proposal. The idea of having an ally in this conflict, especially one from within Tyler's immediate family, was appealing. But I was also wary of getting drawn back into the dysfunctional dynamic before I was ready. I appreciate you reaching out, I said carefully. And I'm sorry about what you went through with your own parents. But I'm not sure I'm ready to re-engage with my parents right now. The last conversation I had with my mother made it clear that she doesn't see anything wrong with her behavior. Vanessa nodded in understanding. I get that, and I'm not asking you to do anything you're not comfortable with. I just wanted you to know that you're not crazy or oversensitive. What they're doing is wrong, and I see it too now. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched by her support. That means a lot. We talked for another hour, moving beyond the family drama to more neutral topics. I learned that Vanessa had a degree in biochemistry, but had shifted to pharmaceutical sales after graduation. She shared stories about her own childhood that humanized her in ways I'd never considered before. By the time we parted, I felt like I'd glimpsed a completely different person than the polished, aloof woman I'd known for years. Let's keep in touch, she suggested as we walked to our cars. Maybe we could arrange for the cousins to see each other sometime, without the grandparents involved. The idea appealed to me. Despite everything, I didn't want my children to lose their relationship with their cousins. I'd like that, I agreed. On the drive home, I pondered this unexpected development. If someone had told me a month ago that Vanessa would become an ally in this family conflict, I would have laughed in disbelief. Yet here we were. David was grading papers at the kitchen table when I returned. "How was it?" he asked, looking up from his work. I set my purse down and pulled out a chair across from him. "Surprisingly, good." Vanessa apologized for Thanksgiving and told me she agrees with us about my parents' favoritism. David's eyebrows shot up. "Seriously? What prompted this revelation?" I recounted our conversation, including Vanessa's disclosure about her own childhood. As I spoke, David's expression shifted from skepticism to thoughtful consideration. "Interesting," he said when I finished. I wouldn't have expected that from Vanessa. Me neither. But it seemed genuine, and it was nice to have someone else validate what we've been saying all along. "So, what now? Are you going to reach out to your parents?" I shook my head. "Not yet. I meant what I said to my mother. I need more than gifts and non-apologies. I need actual recognition of the problem and a commitment to change." David reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you for holding that line. It's not easy." "It isn't," I agreed. "But it's necessary." The first week of January brought a return to normal routines. Back to school for the kids, back to work. For David and me. The winter break had been a needed respite, a chance to recalibrate without the constant pressure of family expectations. But reality couldn't be postponed indefinitely. On a cold Tuesday morning, I was setting up for my first art class of the New Year when my phone rang. Tyler's name flashed on the screen. I stepped into the supply closet for privacy and answered. "Hello?" "Emma." Tyler's voice was tense, controlled. "We need to talk about Mom and Dad." "What about them?" I asked cautiously. "No, Vanessa met with you last week. So much for her keeping that conversation private." "Yes, she did." "She shouldn't have done that behind my back," he said, an edge to his voice. "Family matters should stay within the family." "Isn't Vanessa family?" I countered. "You know what I mean. Between you and me, as their children." I sighed, already tired of the conversation. "What do you want, Tyler?" He paused, and I could almost see him adjusting his approach. Tyler had always been strategic, calculating the best angle to get what he wanted. "Look, I think this whole situation has gotten out of hand," he said, his tone softening. "It's been nearly 6 weeks since Thanksgiving. Don't you think it's time to move past it?" "Has anything changed?" I asked. "Have Mom and Dad acknowledged what they did and committed to treating all their grandchildren equally going forward?" "They sent gifts to your kids for Christmas," he pointed out. "Expensive ones, too." "Gifts aren't the same as understanding." "Tyler, they can't buy their way out of this." He made a frustrated sound. "What exactly do you want from them, Emma? A formal apology? A signed contract promising to be better grandparents?" "I want them to recognize the damage their behavior causes. I want them to see my children, really see them, for the wonderful, unique individuals they are, not as less worthy extensions of me and David." "You're being unrealistic," Tyler said dismissively. "You know Mom and Dad aren't going to change overnight. They're from a different generation, with different values." "Favoritism isn't a value," I retorted. "It's a harmful pattern that hurts children, and age isn't an excuse for it." "So what? You're just going to cut them off indefinitely? Deny them access to their grandchildren?" "I'm setting a boundary," I corrected him. "There's a difference. They're welcome to be part of our lives when they can treat all their grandchildren with equal love and respect." Tyler was quiet for a moment, then spoke in a more measured tone. "Vanessa says she told you about her parents." "She did. She also Says mom and dad remind her of them, that they're creating the same, what did she call it? Toxic dynamic of comparison and conditional approval. I was surprised to hear him quoting Vanessa's insights so accurately. Maybe he had been listening to her after all. Is that what you think too? He asked when I didn't immediately respond. Stu. Question caught me off guard. Tyler had never asked for my opinion like this before, had never seemed interested in my perspective on our parents. Yes, I said simply. I do. Another long pause. I've been thinking about it a lot, he finally admitted, about how they always pushed me to be the best, to achieve more, to compete. How they compared me to other kids, to cousins, even to you sometimes. This was new territory for us. Tyler had never acknowledged the preferential treatment he'd received, had always seemed to accept it as his due. It wasn't healthy, he continued. Even when I was the favored one, it didn't feel good. It felt like constant pressure to maintain that position. Like their love was conditional on my achievements. It was, I said quietly. Still, is in many ways. Yeah. He sighed heavily. I'm starting to see that. The bell rang, signaling 5 minutes until my first class. Tyler, I have to go. My students will be here any minute. Right, sorry. But can we talk more about this? Maybe in person? This weekend, perhaps. The request surprised me again. Tyler rarely made the effort to come to Cincinnati, always expecting us to travel to Chicago for family gatherings. You want to come here? If that's okay, just me, not Vanessa, and the kids. I think we need to figure this out, just the two of us, before involving everyone else. I considered his request. Despite our differences, Tyler was still my brother, and if he was truly beginning to recognize the toxic patterns in our family, perhaps this was a conversation worth having. Saturday afternoon? I suggested. David's. Taking the kids to a science museum exhibit so we'd have the house to ourselves. Perfect. I'll book a flight tonight. He paused. Thanks, Emma, for being willing to talk. Of course, I said, somewhat puzzled by this new, more conciliatory Tyler. That's what siblings do, right? After we hung up, I stood in the supply closet for a moment, processing the conversation. Something had shifted in Tyler, a crack in the perfect facade he'd maintained for so long. Was it Vanessa's influence? His own reflection? Whatever it was, it felt like a potential opening, a chance for something different between us. As my students began filing into the classroom, I pushed the family drama from my mind and focused on the lesson ahead. But a small spark of hope had been kindled. Not that my parents would suddenly change, that seemed unlikely given their entrenched patterns, but that perhaps Tyler and I could find a new way forward, one based on mutual understanding rather than competition and resentment. And maybe that was a start. Not the complete family reconciliation I might have once hoped for, but a new relationship with my brother built on honesty and shared recognition of the damaged patterns we'd grown up with. It wasn't everything, but it was something. A first step on a different path. And for now, that was enough. Saturday arrived with a light dusting of snow that made Cincinnati look like a scene from a winter postcard. After breakfast, David helped the kids bundle up for their trip to the Science Museum, an outing we'd planned well before Tyler's unexpected call. Are you sure you don't want to come with us? David asked as he zipped up Lily's coat. Tyler could meet us there, or wait here until we get back. I shook my head. I think it's better if we talk alone first. Less pressure, fewer distractions. He nodded, understanding my reasoning. Call me if you need anything. We'll be back around 4. Have fun and take lots of pictures, I said, kissing each of the kids goodbye. To Sophia, I added quietly, keep an eye on the twins for me, okay? She nodded solemnly, taking her big sister's responsibilities seriously as always. As they piled into the car, I waved from the doorway, watching until they turned the corner at the end of our street. With the house to myself, I spent the next 2 hours cleaning up breakfast dishes, tidying the living room, and generally keeping myself busy to manage the nervous energy that had been building since Tyler's call. It wasn't that I was afraid of the conversation, more that I was wary of getting my hopes up. Tyler had always been adept at saying what people wanted to hear, especially when he wanted something from them. At exactly noon, the doorbell rang. Tyler had always been punctual, another trait our parents had instilled in him from an early age. I opened the door to find him standing on the porch, looking somewhat out of place in his expensive wool coat and designer boots. Chicago had clearly been good to him financially, if nothing else. "Emma, hey," he said, offering a tentative smile. "Thanks for agreeing to this." "Come in," I replied, stepping aside to let him enter. "Can I take your coat?" He handed it over, then followed me into the living room, glancing around as he did. "The house looks nice. You've done some redecorating since I was last here." I realized, with a start, that Tyler hadn't been to our home in nearly 2 years. The last time was for Ethan and Lily's 6th birthday party, and even then, he'd only stayed for an hour before citing some work emergency and heading back to the airport. "David repainted last spring, and we got some new furniture," I explained, gesturing for him to sit. "Coffee? Tea?" "Coffee would be great, thanks." I escaped to the kitchen, grateful for the moment to gather my thoughts. When I returned with 2 mugs, Tyler was studying the collection of framed photos on our mantel: school portraits, family vacations, candid shots of the kids playing in the backyard. "They're growing up fast," he observed, taking the coffee I offered. "Madison and Jackson, too. It feels like they were babies just yesterday." "Time flies," I agreed, sitting in the armchair across from him. "Speaking of your kids, how are they doing? With everything that's happened, I realize I haven't asked." Tyler sighed, setting his mug on the coffee table. "They're okay. Madison's been a bit difficult lately, pushing boundaries, talking back. Typical preteen stuff, I guess. And Jackson?" He paused, considering his words. "He's struggling in school, actually. His teachers say he's bright but not applying himself. Gets distracted easily." This admission surprised me. Tyler had always painted his children's lives as perfect. Top grades, multiple extracurricular achievements, social success. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said genuinely. "It can be tough navigating those challenges." "Yeah." He looked down at his hands. "The truth is, I think all the pressure from Mom and Dad isn't helping. They're constantly asking about grades, about competitions, about college prep programs, and they're not even teenagers yet. It's too much." I nodded, understanding all too well. "It sets unrealistic expectations." "Exactly. And the worst part is, I've been perpetuating it. Pushing them just like our parents pushed me because that's what I was taught success looks like." He met my eyes. "But after our call, I've been thinking a lot about what that's doing to them, to all of us." "What prompted this reflection?" I asked, curious about the sudden change in perspective. Tyler was quiet for a moment, seemingly organizing his thoughts. "A few things," he finally said. "Vanessa's been more vocal lately about how our parents treat your kids compared to ours. Then, after Christmas, Jackson had a complete meltdown about going back to his competitive math program. Like, sobbing, begging us not to make him go." "That sounds serious," I commented. It was. When I asked why, he said he hates the pressure, hates feeling like Grandma and Grandpa will be disappointed if he doesn't win. "He's 9, Emma. 9 years old and already feeling that weight." Tyler shook his head, genuine distress in his expression, and then I started remembering what it was like for me at that age. The constant expectations, the fear of failure, the sense that love was tied to achievement. "I remember," I said softly. "You won that regional debate championship when you were 12, and Mom and Dad took you to that fancy restaurant in Columbus to celebrate. They talked about it for months. They still mention it, Tyler said with a hollow laugh. But do you know what I remember about that day? Being so nervous I threw up twice before going on stage. Being terrified that if I lost, they'd be ashamed of me. What kind of childhood is that? The vulnerability in his admission touched me. This was a side of Tyler I'd rarely seen. The human beneath the perfect exterior, the brother beneath the golden child persona. It wasn't fair to either of us, I acknowledged. They put too much pressure on you and too little faith in me. And now they're doing the same thing to our kids, Tyler said, leaning forward. That's why I wanted to talk to you. I think we need to present a united front about this. Set some firm boundaries with Mom and Dad about how they treat all the grandchildren. I studied him, looking for signs of the old Tyler, the dismissive brother who always sided with our parents, who valued status and achievement above all else. But his expression was open, his concerns seemingly genuine. I'd like that, I said cautiously. But I need to know you're really on board with this, Tyler. I can't handle another Thanksgiving where you say one thing in private and another in front of them. I know, and I'm sorry about that. He rubbed his face wearily. I've spent my whole life trying to please them, to be the perfect son. It's a hard habit to break. But seeing what it's doing to my kids, to your kids too, I can't ignore it anymore. So what do you propose? Tyler straightened, shifting into what I recognized as his lawyer mode. Organized, strategic. First, we need to be absolutely clear about what behaviors are unacceptable. The comparisons, the different standards, the comments about potential and advantages. All of it stops. Second, we agree on consequences if they continue. Limited contact, supervised visits only. Whatever we decide is appropriate. And third, I added, they need to acknowledge the harm they've caused, not just to our kids, but to us growing up. Without that understanding, nothing really changes. That's the hardest part, Tyler admitted. Mom and Dad don't do introspection. Well, they've convinced themselves they were perfect parents who raised one successful child and one... He trailed off, looking embarrassed. One disappointment, I finished for him. It's okay. I know that's how they see me. But it's not true, Tyler said firmly, surprising me again. You've built a beautiful life, Emma. A loving marriage, 3 amazing kids, a career you're passionate about. By any reasonable measure, you're incredibly successful. Just not in the narrow way they define success. His words warmed something. In me, a cold, doubting place that had never quite believed I was enough. Thank you for saying that. I should have said it years ago. He looked genuinely regretful. I bought into their worldview for too long, measuring everything by money and status. But lately I've been wondering if I'm the one who missed the point. You seem happy, content. I can't remember the last time I felt that way. This confession stunned me. From the outside, Tyler had everything. The prestigious career, the beautiful house, the picture-perfect family. I'd always assumed his life was as golden as our parents made it out to be. Are you not happy? I asked gently. He stared into his coffee mug, as if the answer might be found there. I don't know. I'm successful by most standards. I have everything I was taught to want. But there's this constant pressure to maintain it all, to keep climbing, to make sure Madison and Jackson have even more than I did. It's exhausting. It sounds like it, I agreed. But you know, it's not too late to change course, to redefine what success means for your family. Tyler nodded slowly. That's what Vanessa keeps saying. She wants us to move, actually. Away from Chicago, somewhere less status-driven. She thinks it would be better for the kids. What do you think? I think she might be right. He gave a rueful smile. Don't tell her I said that, though. She'll never let me hear the end of it. I laughed, feeling some of the tension between us dissipate. Your secret's safe with me. We spent the next 2 hours talking, really talking, in a way we hadn't since childhood. Tyler shared his growing concerns about Madison's obsession with social media and designer labels. I told him about Sophia's dream of becoming a nurse, and Ethan's natural talent for mathematics, despite never having been enrolled in a competitive program. As we talked, a plan began to take shape. We would request a meeting with our parents, neutral territory, no children present, where we would clearly outline our concerns and expectations moving forward. If they were willing to acknowledge the problem and commit to changing their behavior, we would gradually reintegrate them into our family gatherings. If not, we would maintain limited, carefully monitored contact that protected our children from their harmful attitudes. They're not going to take this well, Tyler warned as we finalized the details. Especially coming from both of us, they've always counted on us being divided. I know, I said. But that's exactly why it needs to come from both of us. They can dismiss one of us as overreacting or being too sensitive, but not both. As Tyler was preparing to leave, he paused at the door. "There's one more thing I wanted to ask you," he said, suddenly looking uncertain. "Would it be possible for Madison and Jackson to visit sometime soon? Without our parents, just the kids? They've been asking about their cousins." The request touched me. Despite everything, the cousins were still family, and I didn't want to punish Tyler's children for our parents' behavior or our adult conflicts. "Of course," I said warmly. "Maybe during spring break, they could stay for a few days, and we could take them all to that indoor water park the kids love." Tyler's face brightened. "They'd love that. And maybe in the summer your kids could come to Michigan? We've got the lake house and it's pretty great for swimming and kayaking." "I think they'd enjoy that," I agreed, realizing with surprise how much I wanted this reconnection to work, not just for the kids, but for Tyler and me as well. There was something healing about rebuilding this relationship on new, healthier terms. After Tyler left, I sat on the front porch swing for a while, despite the cold. The conversation had left me feeling emotionally drained, but cautiously optimistic. For the first time in decades, my brother and I were truly allies, united in our determination to break the toxic cycle our parents had created. When David returned with the kids, full of stories about their museum adventure, I waited until after dinner to tell him about my conversation with Tyler. "He really said all that?" David asked, clearly skeptical. "About reconsidering his values and standing up to your parents?" "He did," I confirmed. "And I believe him, David. You should have seen his face when he talked about Jackson's meltdown. He's genuinely worried about what this pressure is doing to his kids." David considered this. "People can change," he acknowledged. "Especially when they see their own children suffering. I just hope he follows through when it counts." "That's the test, isn't it?" I agreed. "When we actually sit down with my parents, will he stick to the plan or fall back into old patterns?" "When is this meeting happening?" "We're thinking about next weekend. Tyler will fly in Saturday morning, we'll meet my parents for lunch, and then he'll fly back that evening." David nodded. "Do you want me to come with you?" I considered his offer. Part of me wanted his steady presence by my side, his unwavering support. But another part recognized that this particular conversation needed to be just between my parents and their children. "I think this first meeting should be just Tyler and me," I said. "But knowing you're in my corner means everything." "Always," he promised, squeezing my hand. "No matter what happens with your parents, we've got this. Our family is strong, Emma." The week passed quickly, filled with the usual rhythms of work, school, and family life. I spoke with Tyler twice more, refining our approach for the upcoming conversation with our parents. Each call strengthened my belief that his change of heart was genuine. He was asking thoughtful questions, considering the emotional impact of our parents' behavior, and showing a level of self-reflection I'd never seen from him before. By Friday night, the anticipation had built to a point where I could barely sleep. I kept rehearsing what I wanted to say, imagining my parents' likely responses, preparing counter-arguments. David found me at the kitchen table at midnight, nursing a cup of tea and making notes on a legal pad. "Can't sleep?" he asked, sliding into the chair beside me. "Too much on my mind," I admitted. "I keep worrying that I'll say the wrong thing, or that my parents will somehow twist this around and make us feel like we're the unreasonable ones." "They might try," David acknowledged. "They've had a lot of practice at deflecting responsibility. But remember, you're not that insecure young woman anymore, constantly seeking their approval. You're a strong, confident mother who's protecting her children. Hold on to that perspective." His words centered me, reminding me why this conversation was necessary in the first place. Not to win an argument or secure an apology, but to create a safer, healthier environment for all the children in our family. The next morning, Tyler texted that his flight had landed on time. We'd agreed to meet at a quiet restaurant halfway between Cincinnati and Columbus, neutral territory where none of us would have the home field advantage. David hugged me tightly before I left. "Remember, whatever happens, you did the right thing by addressing this. Some parents never find the courage to break unhealthy cycles." I arrived at the restaurant 20 minutes early, but Tyler was already there, looking uncharacteristically casual in jeans and a sweater rather than his usual business attire. "Nervous?" he asked as I slid into the booth across from him. "Terrified," I admitted. "You?" "Same. I haven't confronted them about anything since I was a teenager. Even then, it didn't go well." "I remember," I said with a small smile. "You wanted to quit debate club to join the basketball team, and Dad lectured you for an hour about throwing away your future for a game." Tyler grimaced at the memory. "And I gave in, like I always did." "Not this time," I said firmly. "This time, we stand our ground." He nodded, determination replacing the anxiety in his expression. "For the kids, all of them." 10 minutes later, our parents walked in. Mom was impeccably dressed as always, her hair freshly styled, her jewelry tasteful but expensive. Dad looked distinguished in his golf club quarter zip, his posture rigid with the military bearing he'd never quite lost, despite decades in civilian life. Their expressions as they approached our table were a mix of confusion and wariness. We'd been deliberately vague about the purpose of this meeting, saying only that we needed to discuss an important family matter. "Tyler, Emma," Dad said, nodding at each of us as they sat down. "This is an unexpected gathering. Is everything all right?" "That's what we're here to discuss," Tyler replied, his lawyer voice in full effect, calm, authoritative, slightly detached. "Emma and I have some concerns we'd like to address with you both." Mom immediately looked alarmed. "Is this about Thanksgiving? Because I thought we'd moved past that unfortunate misunderstanding." "It's not just about Thanksgiving," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the flutter of anxiety in my chest. "It's about a pattern of behavior that's been going on for years, a pattern that's hurting your grandchildren, all of your grandchildren." "What are you talking about?" Dad asked, his brow furrowing. "We adore our grandchildren." "You treat them differently," Tyler stated bluntly. "You favor Madison and Jackson over Sophia, Ethan, and Lily. You make comments comparing them, implying that my children are somehow superior because of their activities or our financial situation." Mom looked genuinely bewildered. "We've never said any such thing. We may have observed that they have different opportunities, but that's just a fact, not a judgment. You told my 7-year-old daughter that you give her cousins special treatment because their parents can provide advantages that we can't," I reminded her. "You said they have more potential than my children." "I was just being honest," Mom protested. "Some children do have more opportunities based on their circumstances. That doesn't mean we love them differently." "But you treat them differently," Tyler insisted. "You fly to Chicago multiple times a year for Madison's activities, but skip Sophia's art shows. You buy expensive electronics for Jackson but clearance toys for Ethan and Lily. Your actions send a clear message about which grandchildren you value more. Dad's face had grown increasingly flushed during this exchange. Now wait just a minute, he said, his voice rising slightly. We've always been generous with all our grandchildren. If we spend more time with Tyler's kids, it's because they live further away and we see them less often. That's not a justification for treating them preferentially when you are together, I countered. Every child deserves to feel equally valued by their grandparents, regardless of geography or socioeconomic status. This is ridiculous, Mom said, looking to Tyler for support. A habitual gesture that spoke volumes about the family dynamic. You can't possibly agree with this. This character assassination, Tyler. The moment of truth had arrived. Would Tyler hold firm, or would he cave to the familiar pressure? He took a deep breath, then spoke with a clarity and conviction that made my heart swell with pride for my brother. I not only agree, Mom, he said quietly. I initiated this conversation because I've seen the harm your behavior is causing. Not just to Emma's children, who feel less valued, but to mine as well, who are being taught that their worth comes from their achievements and advantages. None of them deserve that burden. My parents stared at Tyler in shocked silence, clearly unprepared for this united front. In all our years of family conflict, they'd never faced both their children standing together against them. The conversation that followed was difficult, painful, and at times heated. Our parents cycled through defensiveness, denial, deflection, and eventually anger. Mom cried, Dad grew stone-faced, and both insisted we were exaggerating or misinterpreting their well-intentioned behavior. But through it all, Tyler and I held firm, presenting specific examples, refusing to be gaslighted or manipulated. And slowly, incrementally, something shifted in the dynamic. Not a full acknowledgement or apology, that would have been too much to hope for in a single conversation, but perhaps the first crack in their carefully constructed justifications. We never meant to hurt anyone, Mom finally said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. We just want what's best for all our grandchildren. That's the thing, I replied gently. What's best for them isn't pushing them to be perfect or measuring them against each other. It's loving them for exactly who they are, as individuals with different strengths, interests, and paths. And if you can't do that, Tyler added, his voice firm but not unkind, then we need to limit your influence in their lives. We're not willing to let them grow up feeling either inferior or burdened by impossible expectations. Dad looked at us both, something like resignation settling over his features. So what exactly are you asking of us? Tyler and I exchanged glances. Then I spoke the words we'd carefully prepared. We're asking you to reflect on your behavior and its impact, to commit to treating all your grandchildren with equal love, attention, and respect, and to understand that if you can't or won't do that, then contact will be limited and supervised until you can demonstrate that you've changed. The ultimatum hung in the air between us. Not a threat, but a boundary. One that should have been established long ago. We need some time to process this, Dad finally said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. You've given us a lot to think about. It wasn't the full acknowledgement we'd hoped for, but it was something. A crack in the armor, a potential opening for change. As we parted ways in the restaurant parking lot, the future of our family relationships still hung in uncertainty. But as Tyler and I shared a quick, affirming hug before heading to our separate cars, I felt something I hadn't expected. Hope. Not that our parents would suddenly transform into the loving, equitable grandparents our children deserved. That might never happen completely. But I hope that Tyler and I had finally broken the cycle of competition and resentment that had defined our relationship for decades. We did it, Tyler said quietly. We actually stood up to them. Together. We did, I agreed. Whatever happens next, we did that. And in that moment, Driving away from the most difficult conversation of my adult life, I realized that sometimes the most important family bonds aren't the ones we're born with, but the ones we choose to rebuild and strengthen. Tyler and I had taken the first step toward a new kind of sibling relationship, one based on mutual respect and shared values rather than rivalry and resentment. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined when this journey began at Thanksgiving. It was something more complicated, more nuanced, and ultimately more meaningful. Not a neat resolution, but a new beginning. 3 weeks passed with no word from my parents. Tyler and I checked in with each other every few days, both tentatively hopeful but realistic about the chances of meaningful change. He reported that Vanessa was proud of us for taking a stand, while David continued to offer his unwavering support. At home. "Do you think they'll actually reflect on what we said?" I asked Tyler during one of our calls. "Or are they just waiting for us to back down?" "Hard to say," he admitted. "Dad's reached out to a couple of my law partners about golf, which is his usual move when he's trying to maintain normalcy. But Mom's been uncharacteristically quiet. No calls to Vanessa asking about the kids, no forwarded articles about private high schools for Madison." "That could be a good sign," I suggested. "Maybe she's actually thinking things over." "Maybe," Tyler agreed, though he sounded unconvinced. "Or she's plotting her counteroffensive." Despite the uncertainty hanging over our extended family, life at home continued with its everyday rhythms. Sophia advanced to the district-wide art competition with her mixed media piece about ocean conservation. Ethan's basketball team made the playoffs. Lily was selected to read her original poem at the school assembly. These milestones felt especially significant now, as they were precisely the kinds of achievements my parents had consistently overlooked in favor of Madison's private school honors or Jackson's expensive extracurriculars. With each success, I made sure to celebrate not just the accomplishment itself, but the effort, creativity, and character that went into it. "I'm really proud of how hard you worked on that poem," I told Lily the night before her reading. "The way you found those perfect words to describe how trees change through the seasons was so beautiful," she beamed at me, her small face alight with pride. "Do you think Grandma and Grandpa would like it?" The question caught me off guard. Despite everything, she still craved their approval, still wanted them to see her value. It broke my heart. A little. "I think anyone who really listens to your poem would love it," I said carefully. "Your words are powerful enough to touch anyone who's willing to hear them." She seemed satisfied with this answer, moving on to practicing her delivery one more time. But the moment stayed with me, a reminder of what was at stake in this family. Standoff. Children's sense of self-worth was on the line, not just their relationship with their grandparents. The following weekend, David and I were in the backyard setting up for Ethan's basketball team celebration when my phone rang. My mother's name flashed on the screen. I stared at it for a moment, my heart suddenly pounding, then answered. "Hello? Emma." Her voice sounded different, less certain than usual, almost hesitant. "I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." "We're getting ready for Ethan's basketball party," I said. "But I have a minute." "Oh, that's nice. How did his team do?" she asked, surprising me with what seemed like genuine interest. "They made it to the semifinals," I told her. "Ethan scored the winning basket in their quarter-final game." "That's wonderful," she said. "He must be so excited." There was an awkward pause, both of us navigating this strange new terrain of small talk after weeks of silence following such a significant confrontation. Finally, Mom spoke again. "I was wondering, your father and I have been doing a lot of thinking since our lunch with you and Tyler. We'd like to talk again, if you're willing. Perhaps we could come to you this time. See the children?" I felt a flicker of hope, quickly tempered by caution. "I appreciate that, Mom. But before you see the kids, I think we need to have another conversation, just adults, to make sure we're all on the same page about moving forward." She sighed, But it wasn't her usual exasperated sound. It seemed more resigned, accepting. "You're right. That's fair. When would be a good time?" We arranged for my parents to visit the following Saturday afternoon. David would take the kids to a movie, giving us privacy to talk without them overhearing potentially difficult conversations. As soon as I hung up, I called Tyler. "Mom just called. They want to talk." "Really?" He sounded as surprised as I felt. "What did she say exactly?" I recounted the brief conversation, noting the difference in her tone and approach. "That does sound promising," Tyler agreed. "Less defensive than usual. Do you want me to fly in for the meeting?" "I think I can handle this one," I said, feeling strangely confident. "But maybe be available by phone in case I need backup." "Absolutely." "And Emma?" "Whatever they say, whatever happens, we're doing the right thing." His reassurance meant more than he could know. After a lifetime of competing for our parents' approval, this alliance still felt new and somewhat fragile. But it was growing stronger with each conversation, each shared insight, each moment of mutual support. The week crawled by, my anticipation building as Saturday approached. I found myself rehearsing what I wanted to say, then reminding myself to stay open and listen first. This wasn't about winning an argument. It was about finding a path forward that protected all our children while potentially healing some very old wounds. When Saturday finally arrived, David helped me prepare the living room, making sure it felt welcoming but not overly formal. "Do you want me to cancel the movie and stay?" he offered. "I can take the kids later." I considered his offer. "No, I think it's better if it's just me and my parents first. Less complicated." He nodded, understanding as always. "Call if you need." "Me. We can always leave the movie early." The doorbell rang precisely at 2:00. I took a deep breath and opened the door to find my parents standing on the porch, looking more tentative than I could ever remember seeing them. "Emma," my father said, his usual authoritative tone muted. "Thank you for agreeing to see us." "Come in," I replied, stepping aside to let them enter. Mom was carrying a large gift bag, which she set down carefully by the door. "Just a few things for the children," she explained. "Nothing extravagant, I promise. Just some books I thought they might enjoy." The qualification was new, an acknowledgement, however small, of our previous conversation about excessive gifts, for Tyler's children versus modest ones for mine. We settled in the living room, an uncomfortable silence hanging between us until Dad finally cleared his throat. "Tyler tells us Sophia won an art contest," he began, "and Ethan's team did well in basketball." I nodded, surprised by this opener. "Yes, they both worked very hard." "We'd like to hear more about that," Mom said. "About all 3 children, actually. We realize we may have missed some important things." The admission, tentative as it was, stunned me. My parents had never been ones to acknowledge mistakes or oversights. "You have missed a lot," I agreed, keeping my tone neutral rather than accusatory. "They're amazing kids with their own unique interests and talents." "We know," Dad said, looking uncomfortable but pressing on. "That's part of what we wanted to talk about today. Your mother and I have been doing some serious reflection since you and Tyler confronted us." Mom nodded. "It wasn't easy to hear what you both said. Our first instinct was to defend ourselves, to insist we'd been good parents and grandparents. But the fact that both of you felt so strongly," Dad continued, "made us realize we needed to at least consider the possibility that we've been misguided in our approach." I sat very still, hardly daring to believe what I was hearing. My parents, acknowledging they might have been wrong? It was unprecedented. "We visited a family therapist," Mom said, the words coming out in a rush as if she needed to say them before losing her nerve. 2 sessions so far. It was your father's idea, actually." I looked at Dad in astonishment. He shrugged, seeming almost embarrassed. "I talked to my old Army buddy, Colonel Jenkins. His daughter is a therapist, specializing in family relationships. He said she helped them through some rough patches with their own grandkids. And, I prompted, not sure what to expect. And she helped us see some patterns we hadn't recognized, Mom admitted. Ways we've been perpetuating the same values and expectations our own parents instilled in us. The constant pressure to achieve, to compete, to present a perfect image to the world. She asked us questions no one's ever asked before, Dad added, about what we really want for our grandchildren. What kind of relationship we hope to have with them 20 years from now. Whether accolades and accomplishments are really what make a life well lived. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. This level of self-reflection was so unlike my parents that I felt momentarily disoriented, as if the fundamental rules of our family dynamic had suddenly shifted. It's been uncomfortable, Mom continued. Looking at ourselves this way, recognizing how our behavior has affected you and Tyler, how it might be affecting all our grandchildren. We're not saying we've completely changed overnight, Dad cautioned, even the pragmatist. 70 years of thinking a certain way doesn't disappear in 3 weeks. But we're trying, Mom said earnestly. We want to do better, to be better. Grandparents to all 5 of our grandchildren, to appreciate each of them for who they are, not what they achieve or what advantages they have. I felt tears welling in my eyes, unexpected and somewhat unwelcome. I'd steeled myself for denial, for manipulation, for guilt trips. I wasn't prepared for what seemed like genuine remorse and a desire to change. I appreciate you telling me this, I said carefully. It means a lot that you've taken our concerns seriously enough to seek help. We should have done it years ago, Dad admitted. When you first started pointing out the disparities in how we treated the grandchildren. But we were too stubborn, too convinced we knew best. What changed? I asked, genuinely curious. After all these years, why now? My parents exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. Partly, it was the united front. You and Tyler presented, Mom explained. We couldn't dismiss both of you as oversensitive or misunderstanding. But mostly, Dad added, his voice growing rough with emotion, it was the realization that we were losing you, losing access to our grandchildren, the thought of not being part of their lives, of missing who they become. He trailed off, clearing his throat. It made us question whether our priorities were as sound as we'd always believed. The therapist asked us what we would regret most at the end of our lives, Mom continued. And neither of us said not pushing our grandchildren toward enough achievements. We both said we would regret damaged relationships, missed connections, love withheld because of unrealistic expectations. I nodded, understanding completely. Becoming a parent had clarified my own priorities in much the same way, helping me see that connections and character mattered far more than accomplishments and advantages. So where do we go from here? I asked, still cautious but increasingly hopeful. We'd like to start fresh, Mom said, to get to know your children, all 3 of them, as the unique individuals they are, to attend their events, to show interest in their passions, to love them without conditions or comparisons. And we understand that will take time, Dad added, that we need to earn back your trust and theirs. We're prepared to follow whatever boundaries you set while we work on this. That means a lot, I said sincerely, and I want the kids to have a relationship with you. But you're right, it will take time and consistent effort to rebuild what's been damaged. We spent the next hour discussing specific steps forward. They would begin with short, supervised visits. They would make equal efforts to connect with all 5 grandchildren, including traveling to Cincinnati for Sophia's upcoming art exhibition, just as they would to Chicago for Madison's dance recital. They would continue therapy to address the deeper patterns that had led to their favoritism. As we talked, I felt layers of tension I hadn't even recognized begin to release. This wasn't a complete resolution. My parents still had a long way to go in truly understanding the harm their behavior had caused and changing ingrained patterns of thinking. But it was a beginning, a foundation upon which healthier relationships might be built. When David returned with the children, my parents greeted them with a warmth and attention I hadn't seen before. They asked Sophia about her artwork, listened intently as Ethan described his winning basketball shot, and complimented Lily on her poem, requesting a private reading before they left. The interactions weren't perfect. There were still awkward moments, still instances where I could see my parents consciously restraining their habitual responses. But there was effort, genuine, visible effort to see and value each child for exactly who they were. After my parents left, promising to call later in the week to arrange their next visit, David helped me clean up the living room. "So?" he asked. "What do you think? Was that genuine, or just a new strategy to get what they want?" I considered his question carefully. "I think it was the beginning of genuine. They've taken real steps. Seeing a therapist, acknowledging specific problems, accepting boundaries. That's more than I ever expected, honestly." "People can change," David said, "especially when the alternative is losing something important to them. They just need the right motivation." "And clear boundaries," I added, thinking of how empowering it had felt to finally stand firm with my parents after decades of accommodating their harmful behavior. That evening, I called Tyler to update him on the conversation. "A therapist?" he repeated, sounding as shocked as I had been. "Dad actually agreed to that? The man who once told me therapy was just expensive complaining?" "I know. I could hardly believe it myself," I laughed. "But they seemed sincere, Tyler. Not completely transformed, but genuinely trying to understand and do better." "Wow." He was quiet for a moment, processing. "I didn't expect that outcome. I figured they'd either cut us off completely or pretend nothing had happened and try to steamroll over our boundaries." "Me too," I admitted. "But maybe we underestimated them, or at least underestimated how much they value being in their grandchildren's lives." "So what now? Do we trust this change?" "Cautiously," I said. "With verification, actions over time, not just words in one conversation." "Agreed? And in the meantime, we stick together on this. United front, consistent boundaries." "Absolutely," I promised. No matter what. After we hung up, I found myself drawn to the photo albums I kept in the living room bookcase. I pulled out the oldest one, flipping through images of Tyler and me as children. There we were at the beach, building sandcastles together. At Christmas time, wearing matching pajamas. In the backyard, chasing fireflies as the summer sun set. Before the competition took over. Before achievements began to matter more than connection. Before our parents' expectations and comparisons drove us apart. And now, decades later, we'd found our way back to being allies, to supporting each other, to presenting a united front in service of something larger than ourselves, the well-being of our children and the health of our extended family. I couldn't know for certain whether my parents' efforts at change would last, whether they could truly overcome decades of ingrained patterns and beliefs. Skepticism seemed wise, given our history. But something had shifted permanently between Tyler and me, a healing neither of us had sought, but both had needed desperately. In standing up for our children, we'd somehow found our way back to the siblings we'd once been, before rivalry and resentment had crowded out connection. That alone made the difficult journey worthwhile. And perhaps, just perhaps, it was the first step in breaking a multi-generational cycle that had caused too much pain for too long. The following weekend, Madison and Jackson came to stay with us while Tyler and Vanessa attended a wedding in California. The cousins were tentative with each other at first, years of limited interaction and adult tensions creating an invisible barrier between them. But children are remarkably adaptable, far more so than adults. By the second day, they were building elaborate pillow forts in the living room, sharing inside jokes, and teaching each other games from their respective schools. Watching them together, Madison patiently showing Lily how to braid friendship. Bracelets, Jackson and Ethan engaged in an intense chess match. Sophia leading them all in a backyard scavenger hunt she'd designed. I felt a profound sense of rightness, of pieces finally falling into place. "They're going to be okay, aren't they?" David said quietly, coming to stand beside me as I observed the children from the kitchen window. "I think they are," I agreed. "Better than okay. They're going to have what Tyler and I didn't. The chance to grow up knowing they're valued for exactly who they are, not compared or ranked or measured against each other." "You did that," he said, squeezing my shoulder. "You broke the cycle." "We did it," I corrected him. "All of us. By being willing to have the hard conversations, to set the necessary boundaries, to demand better for our children than what we experienced ourselves." Later that night, after the kids were finally asleep, sprawled across sleeping bags in the living room where they'd insisted on camping out together, I received a text from Tyler. "How's it going? Kids behaving?" I smiled and typed back, "They're wonderful, having a blast together. I think this is the beginning of something important for all of them." His reply came quickly. "For all of us. Thanks for making this possible, Em, for being brave enough to speak up when it would have been easier to stay silent." I stared at the message, tears blurring my vision. After decades of competition, of distance, of carefully maintained defenses, here we were, brother and sister, supporting each other, thanking each other, building something new from the complicated legacy we'd been given. "That's what family is supposed to do," I wrote back. "Stand up for each other, no matter what." And in that moment, I understood something fundamental. Family isn't just about blood relations or shared DNA. It's not about achievements or advantages or keeping up appearances. True family is about acceptance, support, and unconditional love, seeing each person for who they are and valuing them completely, without reservations or rankings or comparisons. It had taken a painful confrontation, a holiday disruption, and the courage to speak difficult truths to reach this understanding. But sitting there in the quiet of my home, listening to the soft breathing of 5 children who were learning to be family in the truest sense of the word, I knew without doubt that it had been worth every uncomfortable moment, every difficult conversation, every tear shed along the way. Some holidays are meant to be disrupted. Some traditions deserve to be broken. Some cycles need to end so that something healthier, something truer, can finally begin. Spring sunshine streamed through the windows of our backyard deck as I arranged the last of the colorful paper plates on the outdoor table. The weather had cooperated beautifully for Sophia's 11th birthday party. Clear skies, mild temperatures, and just enough breeze to keep the decorations gently swaying without blowing away. "Need any help?" David asked, stepping out with a large cooler of drinks. "I think we're just about set," I replied, surveying the transformed space. Handmade decorations in Sophia's favorite colors hung from every possible surface. A craft table was fully stocked for the DIY jewelry-making activity she'd requested, and her cake, a stunning creation featuring edible watercolor paints, waited in the refrigerator. "What time is everyone arriving?" he asked, arranging juice boxes and water bottles in neat rows. "The kids from her class will be here at once. Tyler's family should arrive around noon for lunch before the main party. And my parents?" I checked my watch. "They said they'd be here by 11 to help set up." David raised an eyebrow. "And you're okay with that? Them helping?" I smiled, understanding his protective instinct. "I am, actually. They've been consistently showing up for months now. I think they've earned a little trust." The past year had brought changes none of us could have anticipated when this journey began. My parents had continued their therapy, sometimes inviting Tyler or me to join sessions where they worked through deeply ingrained patterns. The progress wasn't always linear. There were still moments of backsliding, Still occasions when I caught my mother making subtle comparisons or my father focusing too intently on achievements over character. But there was genuine effort, consistent and visible. They'd attended Ethan's science fair and Lily's dance recital with the same enthusiasm they showed for Madison's tennis tournaments. They'd traded their usual extravagant gifts for more thoughtful ones that reflected each child's interests: art, supplies for Sophia, building sets for Ethan, books for Lily. They'd even started an education fund for each grandchild, contributing the exact same amount to each, regardless of what school they might attend. The doorbell rang at precisely 11 o'clock. My father's military punctuality was one trait that would never change. When I opened the door, I found my parents laden with bags containing party supplies. "Good morning, sweetheart," Mom said, kissing my cheek as she passed. "We brought those extra string lights you mentioned, and some additional craft supplies in case there are more children than expected." Dad followed with several packages of paper goods. "Where would you like these? And is there anything heavy that needs moving?" "The lights can go out back with David, and the crafts on the dining room table for now," I directed. "I think we're good on the heavy lifting, but thanks for offering." As they moved through the house, I noticed my mother pause at the wall of family photos in our hallway. We'd recently added several new frames, including pictures from our summer vacation to Tyler's lake house and Thanksgiving at our home, our first holiday together after the confrontation that had changed everything. "These are lovely," she said, studying the images. Everyone looks so happy. "We were," I confirmed, coming to stand beside her. "It was a good summer." She touched a photo of all 5 cousins squeezed onto a paddleboard, laughing as they tried to maintain their balance. "They've become so close. It's wonderful to see." "It is," I agreed. "They text each other constantly now. Madison is planning to take Sophia to her first big concert next month. They're both obsessed with the same singer, apparently." Mom smiled, a genuine expression free from the tight, controlled quality I'd grown up with. "I'm glad. Cousins should be friends." She hesitated, then added, "Your father and I were talking recently about our own childhoods, how we never had that connection with our extended families, how much we might have missed." This kind of reflection was new for my mother, a willingness to examine her own upbringing and its impact on her parenting style. The therapist had been working with my parents on this, encouraging them to identify the sources of their competitive, achievement-focused approach to family. "It's never too late to create those connections," I said gently. "Look at how much has changed in just 1 year." She nodded, her eyes lingering on a particular photo, one of her kneeling beside Lily at the community garden where they'd planted flowers together last month. It had been a spontaneous outing, just the 2 of them, and Lily had chattered about it for days afterward. "I never thought I could enjoy something as simple as digging in dirt with a child," Mom admitted. "But it was one of the loveliest afternoons I've had in years. Just being together, no agenda, no expectations." "That's what it's all about," I said. "Those moments of connection. Not the achievements or the advantages or any of the things we thought were so important." She squeezed my hand briefly, then continued down the hall toward the dining room with her bags of supplies. By noon, the house was buzzing with activity. Tyler and Vanessa arrived with Madison and Jackson, along with brightly wrapped gifts and a tray of Sophia's favorite cookies that Vanessa had baked specially. "The traffic was awful," Vanessa said, greeting me with a warm hug. "But we made it. Where's the birthday girl?" "Upstairs with Lily, putting finishing touches on their matching party outfits," I explained. "You know how they've become about coordinating." "Everything," Vanessa laughed. "Madison is the same way. When Jackson suggested they wear similar shirts today, I nearly fainted from shock. Usually she insists they pretend they're not related in public." Our relationship had evolved as much as any other in the family over the past year. What began as a tentative alliance had developed into a genuine friendship, complete with regular phone calls, occasional girls' nights when they visited, and a shared understanding of the complicated dynamics we'd both navigated in our families of origin. Tyler entered from the kitchen, where he'd been helping David set up the grill. "Emma, those photo books you made for Mom and Dad's anniversary are in my car. Want me to grab them now or after the party?" "Let's wait," I suggested. "Too many little hands around right now. They'd be covered in cake and craft glue within minutes." He nodded, then lowered his voice. "How are things going with them today? Any tension?" "None at all," I assured him. "They've been perfect, helpful, appropriate, genuinely excited for Sophia." "Amazing how far we've come," he mused. "Remember where we were this time last year? Barely speaking to them, monitoring every interaction with the kids." "It's been a journey," I agreed. "Not always easy, but worth it." Jackson appeared in the doorway, his usual electronic device conspicuously absent. "Aunt Emma, can I help with anything? Dad said I should ask." Another change, small but significant. Where once he would have isolated himself with his games, now he sought connection, engagement. The family therapy had extended to Tyler's household as well, with all of them working to create healthier patterns. "Actually, yes," I told him. "Could you help Ethan bring the sports equipment to the backyard? We're setting up stations for the party games." "Sure thing," he agreed easily, heading off to find his cousin. The main party began at 1 o'clock, with a dozen of Sophia's classmates arriving in quick succession. The backyard filled with laughter and excited chatter as children moved between activity stations, crafted jewelry, played games, and eventually gathered around to watch Sophia blow out her candles. Throughout it all, I observed my parents interacting, with all 5 grandchildren with equal attention and affection. Mom helped at the craft table, patiently assisting not just Madison, but every child who needed help stringing beads. Dad organized a modified baseball game that included players of all skill levels, offering gentle encouragement to Lily, who was typically more interested in books than sports. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, I found myself sitting on the deck steps beside Tyler, both of us watching the family scene before us. Our parents were helping the remaining children clean up craft supplies. David and Vanessa were packaging leftover cake for guests to take home. The 5 cousins had gathered in a circle on the lawn, clearly planning some new adventure. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't spoken up at Thanksgiving?" Tyler asked quietly. "If you'd just let it go, like all the times before?" I considered his question. "I think we'd still be caught in the same dysfunctional patterns. The kids would be growing up with the same harmful messages we received. The cycle would continue." "Thank you for having the courage to break it," he said sincerely. "I'm not sure I would have found my own voice if you hadn't used yours first." "You might have," I countered. "When you saw how it was affecting Madison and Jackson, sometimes it takes seeing our own patterns reflected in our children to recognize what needs to change." He nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe. Either way, I'm grateful. For where we are now. For what the kids have with each other and with us." As the afternoon transitioned to evening, our gathering grew smaller and more intimate. Tyler's family was staying the night before driving back to Chicago the next day. My parents had decided to get a hotel room nearby rather than making the 2-hour drive home after a long day. After the younger children were tucked into bed, Ethan and Jackson sharing the guest room, Lily on a trundle bed in Sophia's room, the adults gathered on the deck with glasses of wine and the gentle glow of string lights overhead. "A toast," Dad proposed, raising his glass. "To Sophia on her birthday, and to family, the one we were given and the one we've built together." We clinked glasses as a comfortable silence settled over us, the kind that can exist only between people who have moved beyond surface connections to something deeper and more authentic. "I've been thinking about writing a book," Mom said suddenly, surprising all of us. "About family dynamics, favoritism, the mistakes we made, and what we've learned through therapy." "That's unexpected," Tyler remarked, voicing what we were all thinking. Mom smiled. Dr. Winters, our therapist, suggested it might be healing, and possibly helpful to other families struggling with similar issues. I think it's a wonderful idea, I encouraged. You've certainly gained valuable perspective over this past year. We both have, Dad added. It's humbling to realize at our age that so many of our fundamental assumptions about parenting and grandparenting were misguided. If our experience can help others avoid those same mistakes, that seems worthwhile. The conversation continued, flowing naturally between topics: Vanessa's new job offer, David's summer research project, Tyler's consideration of scaling back his work hours to be more present with his family. Through it all, I felt a sense of ease that had been absent in our family gatherings for as long as I could remember. No one was performing. No one was competing. No one was measuring themselves against impossible standards. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I found myself unable to sleep. I slipped quietly from the bedroom, careful not to wake David, and made my way to the kitchen for a glass of water. To my surprise, I found my mother at the kitchen table, a cup of tea cooling before her as she gazed out the window at the moonlit yard. "Can't sleep?" I asked softly, not wanting to startle her. She looked up, offering a small smile. "Just reflecting. It was a beautiful day." I poured myself some water and joined her at the table. It was. Sophia was thrilled with everything, especially the art supplies you and Dad gave her. "We put a lot of thought into it," Mom said. "We wanted her to know we truly see her, her passion for creating, her unique perspective, not just as an extension of you or in comparison to her cousins, but as herself." "She knows," I assured her. "All three of them do. They talk about you and Dad so differently now. There's an ease there, a security that wasn't present before." Mom nodded, her eyes suspiciously bright in the dim kitchen light. "I have regrets, Emma. So many regrets about the years we wasted, the damage we caused with our rigid expectations and favoritism." "I know," I said gently, "but you're making different choices now. That's what matters moving forward. I wonder sometimes if we can ever fully repair what was broken," she confessed, "especially with you and Tyler. If the scars of how we raised, you will always remain, no matter how much we try to do better now." It was a vulnerable admission from a woman who had spent most of her life avoiding vulnerability at all costs. "I think," I said carefully, "that some scars do remain. Tyler and I both carry the effects of our upbringing, his need to achieve, my lingering insecurities. We probably always will to some extent." Mom's face fell, pain evident in her expression. "But," I continued, "that doesn't mean healing isn't possible. Look at how far we've all come in just 1 year. Look at the relationship Tyler and I have built, the cousins' connections with each other, the genuine efforts you and Dad have made to change." "Do you think you can ever fully forgive us?" she asked quietly. I considered her question, wanting to offer honesty rather than easy reassurance. "I think forgiveness isn't a single moment but a process. I'm working on it every day, just as you're working on changing the patterns that caused the harm. We're all growing together, moving forward together." She reached across the table and took my hand, a gesture so uncharacteristic of the mother I'd grown up with that it momentarily caught me off guard. "Thank you," she said simply, "for giving us the chance to do better, for not giving up on the possibility that we could change even when you had every reason to." "Family is worth fighting for," I replied, not the superficial version focused on appearances and achievements, but the real thing, the connections that sustain us, the love that accepts us as we are. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the moonlight casting gentle shadows across the kitchen. In that quiet moment, I felt a sense of peace that had been elusive for most of my life, the peace that comes not from perfect resolution, but from authentic reconciliation, with all its messiness and ongoing work. The journey wasn't over. There, would still be difficult conversations, still moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. My parents would never be perfect grandparents. Such a thing doesn't exist. Tyler and I would never completely erase the competitive dynamic that had been instilled in us from childhood. But we were writing a new story now, one day at a time. Creating new traditions, establishing healthy boundaries, building relationships based on acceptance rather than expectation, and most importantly, showing our children a different way forward, one where their worth wasn't measured by achievements or advantages, but by the simple, profound truth of who they were. 2 days after the party, I was helping Sophia sort through her birthday gifts when she handed me a small envelope I hadn't noticed before. "I forgot to show you this one, Mom," she said. "Grandma gave it to me privately before she left." Curious, I opened the envelope to find a handwritten note and a delicate silver necklace with a palette-shaped charm. The note read, "Dearest Sophia, this necklace belonged to my mother, your great-grandmother. She was an artist too, though few people knew it. In her generation, women were discouraged from pursuing creative passions, especially in my family where practical matters were valued above all else. I never appreciated her talent when I was growing up. I was too busy trying to be what my father thought I should be: practical, achievement-oriented, focused on measurable success. It wasn't until after she passed away that I found her sketchbooks hidden in an old trunk. Page after page of beautiful drawings she'd created in secret moments, never shared with the world. I've kept this necklace all these years, waiting for the right person to pass it to. Someone who would embrace their creativity openly and proudly, without the limitations my mother faced or the misguided values I tried to impose on your mother. You are that person, Sophia. Your talent, your vision, your courage to express yourself through art. These are precious gifts. Never let anyone convince you they're less valuable than any other achievement. I am so proud to be your grandmother, not because of what you accomplish, but because of who you are." With all my love, Grandma blinked back tears as I handed the note back to Sophia, who was examining the necklace with reverent fingers. "Isn't it beautiful, Mom?" she asked. "Grandma said it's really, really old and special." "It is," I agreed, my voice thick with emotion. "Just like you." As she returned to organizing her gifts, I stepped into the hallway, needing a moment to process what I'd just read. The note revealed something I'd never known about my mother, a family history that perhaps explained some of her rigid expectations, her emphasis on practical achievements over creative pursuits. It didn't excuse the favoritism or the harm it had caused. Nothing could, but it offered context, understanding, another piece in the complex puzzle of our family dynamics. And more than that, it represented something I'd once thought impossible: my mother's genuine growth, her ability to recognize and affirm a value, system different from the one she'd been raised with and had tried to impose on her own children. I pulled out my phone and typed a simple message: "Thank you for the necklace you gave Sophia. It means more than you know, to both of us." Her reply came quickly: "Thank you for showing me what really matters, before it was too late." I smiled, tucking the phone back into my pocket. The journey of healing our family would continue, with its inevitable setbacks and difficult moments. But in that necklace, in that thoughtful note, in that text exchange, I found confirmation that we were moving in the right direction, toward authentic connection, toward genuine acceptance, toward the kind of family I'd always wished for but never quite believed possible. Sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most necessary changes. Sometimes family traditions need to be disrupted for healthier ones to take their place. And sometimes standing firm in your truth, even when it means saying you weren't welcome at our holiday, is the first step toward creating the family everyone deserves, one where love isn't conditional, worth isn't comparative, and belonging isn't something you have to earn. Looking for more? We've got two amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.